Hello and welcome to episode number 10. I think we all know by now it's the Black Feather podcast, a rugby fan cast about the Ospreys by the fans. So you might notice we've got someone else joining us this week, and we thought because it's episode 10, we'd give you guys a treat and we'd get someone on to have a chat with us. And we haven't just got anybody on to chat with us, guys. We've got an author, an actual published author. So I'd like to say welcome to Seimon Williams, who wrote Welsh Rugby, What Went Wrong. Now, so that's a really thin book about what went wrong in Welsh Rugby. I was expecting Encyclopedia Britannica, but having read it, it's absolutely fantastic. Really nice, really quick, really easy read, really concise. And if you're wondering why and how we managed to get Si on, that is because Si and Mark known each other since babies. They started school together at 4.
Yeah.
So I think it's only fair that Mark and Si have a chat about his book. We run through some things. I think we all agree, guys, there's some common themes running through this from the 1970s right up to present day. And we've got a lot to unpack. There's a lot's gone on in the last couple of years. And it does seem as though history repeats itself, to quote Shirley Bassey. So, Mark, if you want to fire away, my little muffin.
Thank you very much, Sam. Yeah. Diolch yn fawr am ddod, Sam. Thanks so much for, thanks so much for joining us tonight. As Sam said, we go back all the way to primary school. Just to give you a bit of context, we spent a lot of time watching not just rugby, but football, cricket, snooker, whatever we can get our hands on pretty much, I think, and choosing Welsh teams and going off to matches and this, that and the other. Si was a very good friend to have because his dad had contacts that could get international tickets. So very, very useful in that respect as well. But yeah, my first international was with this gentleman in '89, I think, against England was my first game. I think he might have been to one or two before then. But yeah, I'll go back a long way, really. And yeah, but the first thing I was going to ask you, I mean, you've lived through everything you've written about. What on earth possessed you to want to research it all and write all about it again?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, thanks. Diolch yn fawr for the invite. It's really nice to get the invite on tonight. We appreciate it. Yeah, so as you will know, all of you, and especially you, Mark, and I went through a lot of this together for the 80s and a lot of parts of the 90s. It was pretty grim and pretty attritional stuff. So really, I started writing and blogging really years ago on a site called WRU Rugby, and because I'd continued blogging away and churning this stuff out while other people had grown up and found more profitable things to do with their time, or less traumatic things to do anyway, I kept churning these out with a couple of other lads, and just out of the blue, really, somebody from Ololfa, from the publishing house in Ceredigion, in Talabont, between Aberystwyth and Pwllheli, got in touch, and he'd been reading the blogs and asking whether I wanted to try and put something together and suggest something, because this was the middle weekend of last year's Six Nations. So the 2023 Six Nations, it was the week of the threatened strike, and there were all of the issues that were emerging from that. You had all of the issues with the Wales team struggling, the Wayne Pivac being sacked, Warren Gatland coming back, the revelations with the BBC Wales Investigates programme, and the falling up between the regions of the union, the difficulty of getting that deal together, the players facing 70 or plus of them facing redundancy at the end of the season, not knowing where they were going to be. And then this came to the head with the threat of the strike, which was averted, and then the game went ahead. And eventually, obviously, there was a resolution of sorts. So this editor, this commissioning editor at Ololfa, just approached me and I think a couple of other people and wondered whether, given the way that things were falling off a cliff so spectacularly and had sort of fallen from that kind of peak of 2019 of the #1 team in the world and the 40-match unbeaten run and all of that World Cup semi-final to where we were at the start of 2023, whether I wanted to put something together. So I pitched it, and I thought that really you couldn't really understand what was going on then, the late 22 to early 23, without really understanding the whole context of it, of how we got to where we got to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it came around, really. It was quite a quick thing. So you mentioned there, Sam, there's quite a thin book, and it is, I had my limit set on me by the publishers to start with. First of all, it was my first book. They didn't know what I was going to churn out. So they probably thought it was probably wise. But also they wanted to get it out quickly because obviously you never know. At the time, things were looking bleak. Things could turn because things do turn relatively quickly sometimes in rugby and in Welsh rugby. So it's kind of, I put this idea together in March, got commissioned in April. It was basically done by August, and then we sort of held on for the World Cup then, so we did a final chapter then at the end of the World Cup to summarise what had gone on there. And obviously that went a little bit better than perhaps some of us expected. So we had a bit of a panic as well, whether could we actually release this or not.
Yeah.
Because we nearly got on the semi-final. Semi-final, like, oh, everything's fine again. So it was really quick, a turnaround, and it was put together in about 4 or 5 months, and it was quite interesting to look back on it again.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it is quite a sobering read. As much as it's entertaining, I don't think you realize when you read through it just how much has happened over those years. You sort of live through those times, and you get the ups and downs, the successes, the periods of darkness and failure as well, and you sort of forget how many highs and lows they've been, I suppose, over the last 30 years, I guess. I mean, one of the most depressing things now, I think, especially with what's coming through this week, is some of the recurring themes that are coming through the book that are still continuing to happen. So, thinking about the relationships at the sort of top of the union, throughout those years, call it incompetence or whatever you want to, or how out of touch the union leadership has been for so long. And I suppose the question is, with what's come out this week, has anything actually changed?
It's really depressing, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
I mean, we thought we kind of reached the kind of reckoning start of 2023, where Steve Phillips was resigned with a £500,000 payoff, whatever, and we had all of those issues, and it seemed as if we kind of drawn a line into what had happened, reckoned and recognised what had gone wrong. That the way that especially women within the union, both in administrative capacities and the playing capacities, had been badly treated. But also the culture, the macho kind of misogynistic, racist, homophobic culture that was within the union and was just ingrained there. And you kind of thought that now that the problem was that public and that reckoning had been had, and the Welsh government were involved and the Senedd were involved, and there was all of this external pressure on the union, that surely now they would sort things out, at least in terms of the culture. The financial aspect is something else, and that's obviously a bigger problem. But it's a totally different problem and a huge issue in itself. But in terms of the culture, you'd thought they'd been able to get a grasp on it. They got a new chief executive, they had an independent chair, completely restructured the board, they brought all sorts of expertise in. And then it's happened again. We're 18 months down the road, and we have these stories of the women's team again being badly treated again and being bullied. There was listening to the Scrum 5 podcast yesterday or earlier today, I think it was, and Alex Cuthbert was referring to it as bullying. They just bullied the team, the squad.
Yeah,
I think he referred to it as blackmail.
Blackmail,
and, on paper,
absolutely,
it is.
It's threatening.
And these are ladies who aren't as experienced as some of the men in those contracted negotiations. So it feels like blackmail, and it feels exploitative.
Well, it does, because the power dynamic is totally out of whack, isn't it? So unfortunately for the union, because they've tried to argue that this is just something that went wrong and isn't indicative of something deeper rooted and isn't an example of sexism within the union. And unfortunately for them, that isn't a counterfactual. We know what happened when the men went through exactly this 18 months ago. So when the men it was slightly different because the dynamics are different. The players aren't directly contracted to the union in the men's game, whereas a lot of the women are. But essentially, it was a dispute about contracts and the players being unhappy with the contracts they've been offered, or not being offered contracts in the case of the men 18 months ago because of the dispute between the regions and the union. But of course, the men's team, that England game, is worth £8 to £10 million to the union. So if that game didn't go ahead, and this is again something, as you mentioned there, Rob, that I think Alex Cuthbert mentioned, that Nigel Walker there, who was a bit of a common thread through a lot of these stories, unfortunately, he told the male players, that if they didn't play the game, they wouldn't be regions for next season, because that £8 to £10 million hole will be blown in the budget for the union. The women didn't have that. So the union could come to them and say, well, if you don't sign these, then we'll get the under-20s in, or we'll withdraw from the WXV2, or we'll withdraw from Rugby World Cup, and then where are you going to be? So the power dynamic is completely out of whack, and it's they treated the women differently because the women didn't have the power that the men had in this context, and that's unfortunately just indicative of the way the union's been for a number of years. Really.
Sorry, Mark, I'm butting in,
No,
but
fine,
do you think those threats were empty then? Do you think they were just throwing their weight around in order to get what they want, or do you think they would have taken that reputational and that financial hit to withdraw those contracts and pull the Welsh women out of those two big competitions, Rugby World Cup next year and WXV2? Do you think they meant that?
I think they meant for the women to believe that.
Yes.
I don't know whether they actually meant it or not. I mentioned just now there's a thread in that, unfortunately, for somebody my age, Mark's age, we remember the 90s, and Nigel Walker and Ian Evans were two of the shining stars in a sea of mediocrity, really, in many ways. And both of them have spent the last 4 or 5 years torching their reputations, it seems, now that they've got into administrative roles, and governance roles.
I really thought they would have done better, being ex-players and seeing what went on. You would have thought that they would have done better. And it's not, you mentioned this in the book, it's not the first time that the Welsh Rugby Union, has got rid of A teams, have got rid of women's teams. You can think, right, okay, that's quite a thinly veiled threat, but you've got no guarantee that they won't go through with it, because they've done diabolical things in the past with women's rugby. And I think the thing that's come out of this is there's been lots of I hate to say the word brave, because it's not being brave, it is just standing up and speaking out for yourself. And I think as a woman, I'm sorry, fireworks going off, I'm quite a strong feminist, and I don't think it is brave for a woman to stand up for herself. She's not being bossy, she's not being feisty, she's not being opinionated. She is just being that's the bottom line. So for these players to come out, such as Jess Kavanagh, and make the comments that they have, I think is fantastic, because they're making it quite clear, okay, we've left the sport, but this is what we've endured, this is what we've gone through. Because in all fairness to them all, they've all stuck together, they've all kept that togetherness. And they've all been quite a support for each other, and all of them have been quite scathing about Nigel Walker. This is 2 instances now with the men's game and the women's game. Do we allow that behaviour to continue? Because I hate any kind of ism, but this, a year on, we've learned nothing. We've just swept it under the carpet again.
It seemed from listening to Scrum 5 today, the letter that went to the ladies, to the women's team rather, came from Nigel Walker. It was on his authority that threat went to them, about the 3 hours to make a decision, basically, or we pull you out of these competitions. But again, he seems to be a bit Teflon, isn't he? He seems to be nothing seems to be sticking, and nobody seems to be taking accountability. It's been passed down the chain, to Abitini, to Nigel Walker. It's sort of, to Owen Cunningham even. He's been implicated within it in terms of trying to persuade the women to sign the contracts and things. And it's, who is going to take accountability, if anything, if anyone, for this, really? Because at the moment, they seem to think that just an apology is enough. But as you said, Sam, that's exactly what we had 12 months ago in a similar situation. And an apology this time doesn't seem sufficient.
Yeah,
they've apologised because they've been caught. Sorry, for cutting you off. They've apologised because they've been caught. They've not apologised because they're sorry. That's not an apology. That's a firefighting exercise and a PR exercise. If you were sorry, you do something, you take practical action against it. Some of the stuff that they were arguing about, things like maternity pay, are we still arguing about that in 2024? These women are elite athletes. They're fit. I don't think they're going to be the type of women who are going to put on like 10 stone when they're having a baby. They're going to continue to train. That's their life. They're going to have the baby. Look at some of the Olympic athletes who have had babies and then have popped back and within a year won Olympic medals. They train, their bodies are fit, not to provide them with that ability to think that they've got the surety of a wage to be able to have a child is just awful. That is just didn't think they could stoop any lower, and they've gone and surpassed my expectations, and not in a good way,
Yeah.
you know?
I almost didn't wear my jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't. More than
Yeah.
glad.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
does make you wonder, though, doesn't it? Who is going to take accountability? Do you think anybody will say on this, or it's just going to be one of those things where everybody just moves on?
I mean, it's tempting. I mean, Nigel Walker's getting a lot of the flack at the moment, and it seems some of it is justified. And I've often felt with Walker that he's a bit clumsy in the way that he speaks, and he sometimes says things he doesn't intend to say, which I think may explain away the stuff that he was saying to the men last year, and may explain away that really crass comment that he made on the BBC before the Wales England game, where he said he was going to hold the region's feet to the fire and make sure that they signed the players up when the region still didn't have a contract in place. They didn't have any money. They couldn't do it because the agreement wasn't signed. But he said, "I'm going to hold them their feet to the fire," which was just a crass thing to say. I think what makes this worse, this latest instance, is that it isn't a clumsy comment. He's taken time to sit down and write a letter, it seems, with these threats. So it's not something that's just slipped out, or he's just accidentally blurted something out, which he does in interviews occasionally. He's obviously sat down and thought about this and thought that this was the way to proceed. And it's a difficult one, because what we've seen throughout the history of the Welsh Rugby Union and the period that I covered in the book, and you were saying there, Sam, that every time you think things can't get any worse, they do, and that's kind of the theme running through the book, really, is that we never reach rock bottom. But what often happens is a scapegoat is found, and one person is found, and they take the fall. And 18 months ago, it was Steve Phillips who took the fall. But a lot of other people stayed there, and a lot of the members on the board, even though the board is reconstituted, a number of the district reps who were there previously were still on the board. A number of the staff there were still there. People in the finance department were still there for a while. So finding scapegoats doesn't seem to work. It seems to be kind of just endemic there. There seems to be a cultural issue in there that isn't being resolved. In terms of who takes the blame for this, there's a clear inference, I think, in the statement that the union released last week, that Nigel Walker is going to be it. He's going to get it for this, because there was a line in there, I can't remember the exact words, but it said something like, when Abitini became aware of this issue and Richard Colin-Keywood became aware of these issues, they stepped in. Abitini took over the discussions with the representatives of the women. Richard Colin-Keywood started these two work streams up, and it was kind of, Nigel was sidelined. It was kind of, now the grown-ups are in, now we're sorting it out, and it was Nigel's fault. And that seemed to be the message that I think we were supposed to get. Whether that's actually going to happen, I don't know, because, as you say, there are people that are kind of quite immune to this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I suppose time will tell on this, and I guess the unions are hoping that Wales have a good autumn to distract from everything else that's happening, I would imagine. But something. I mean, interesting that the players themselves, the current players anyway, haven't commented yet. They've pulled rank and sort of said, we're not going to comment until all contracts are signed and until everything's resolved. So it'll be interesting once everything has been sorted. What kind of statements they do come out with at that point as a sort of collective, I would imagine. In terms of what has happened, and that may depend on what sort of decisions have been made at union level, and if anybody does bite the bullet for it, I suppose. Moving on, another theme that runs through the book is the union's relationship with clubs and with regions latterly as well. And again, it's very current in terms of news, with the union over the last few weeks making the offer to the regions to clear a certain amount of debt in order to have more of an ownership and more of a say in where coaches are going to be, in terms of where players are going to play, positions that they're going to play. You're a Scarlet supporter, we've still got you on regardless of that tonight. But as a Scarlet supporter, how would you feel about the union coming in and sort of taking over to an extent in that way?
I wouldn't trust them an inch. I think there's the union we've never had totally centralised domestic elite rugby in Wales for a reason. Is that the union do not have the wherewithal, financial or in terms of capability of doing it. You know, back 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, we had that civil war between Roger Lewis, who was taking the regions on. And if ever there was a time that the union were going to take over the four clubs or do something with the four clubs, that was it. That was going to be it. And he couldn't do it because the union didn't have the wherewithal to do it. The regions have turned down this 20% share idea, which I'm glad about. But I think there's still discussion about a golden share, which to me doesn't seem to be an enormous amount different to the 20% share. It still gives the union a great say in playing matters. You know, where players play in terms of their position, which clubs they play at, when they get rested, when they get played, which is, you know, alarming, isn't it? Because these are independent businesses. They're either centrally owned or they're not. You can't have somebody else, like the benefactors who are now being dragged back in to cover the debt, to carry any underspends, you know, or any issues there, also overspends, to cover any debts and recruit, and then insist on having a say on who plays where and when.
Yeah.
For the national coach to have that say when the national coach doesn't know if Ben Thomas is a 10 or a 12 or basically or a 13 or an 11 or a 14, you know.
Yeah.
So and it's on one individual. It's a recipe for chaos, isn't it? I mean, that debt that if they're indicating they're willing to take back onto their books is their debt in the first place. It's not the region's debt. No. So they should be getting something for doing what they should be doing anyway. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So no, not a fan.
Yeah, and it's the same as we talked about last week, and I think the three of us were in full agreement last week. There was a definite no from the Ospreys' perspective as well. Rod, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so what is a golden share then? Is that a technical business terminology, or is that something they've just invented that sounds fancy?
That sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah.
What's the realistic difference?
In terms of from my understanding of it, I don't think there is a difference. It's just that if at some point the regions start turning a profit, which isn't beyond the bounds of possibility. I mean, the Scarlets were doing that a bit, like for a very short period when they were quite successful a few years ago. But
I can answer this.
Sorry, go on.
I can answer this only because I did a bit of commercial law. And a golden share is a type of share in a company limited by shares where you don't own a controlling share in a company, but you do have the power to veto and make decisions as though you had a, say, for example, you had a 51% share. So you'd be like, I own 51% of this company, I'm doing X. The actual fact is you've got no controlling power unless you own a substantial share in a company. However, what the Welsh Rugby Union is saying, we've got this golden share which allows us to make these decisions. We can tell you with player consent where these players are going to play, how many minutes they're going to play, what position they're going to play in, and everything else. So it's got special rights and privileges. So it can block certain decisions that your major shareholders may make. So basically they could say computer says no on certain things. So it could be like if you've got three players in a certain position and you're all vying, they'd be like, right, one goes to Newport, one goes to Newport, one goes to Cardiff, one stays with you at the Ospreys. So they can look at who's got what and where and kind of move everybody around like their chess pieces on a board. Golden share's not ideal.
So it's a decision-making stake rather than a financial stake.
Yeah, so you haven't got your 20% equity, but what you have got is the ability to be holding the cards against your chest, really.
Well, that's what we all had a problem with anyway.
Yeah,
that's what we didn't like.
Exactly. Yeah,
but now I've shown my knowledge.
Because that element of it exists either way, doesn't it? Whether it's a 20% or a golden share, it still gives the union the ability to potch about, which they shouldn't be. I mean, they've twice had stakes in regions, haven't they? They had a stake in the Celtic Warriors, which folded after a season, and they had a stake in the Dragons for years and years and years, and well, you know, didn't do them much good, did it?
No, exactly. Just a couple more points then about the book before we go on to talking about the autumn a little bit as well. Another theme that seems to be going on the whole of my rugby watching career is where the Welsh clubs play and now where the Welsh regions play. In the last couple of months, we understand there's been discussions around three sort of possibilities: staying in URC, an Anglo-Welsh league, a British and Irish league. Where do you think the regions sit best within that sort of structure?
I think where they sit best and where they will sit are two different things. I
Right.
think. So, I mean, we're old enough to remember those Anglo-Welsh games, right?
Yeah,
And they were a natural, organic, evolving thing that had developed over decades and decades. So, basically the four clubs that we've got, or the Scarlets and Leslie, Cardiff, Newport, and Athena, West Glamorgan, Swansea at that time. I've always had that relationship with clubs in England, especially. So, and this is going back into the game's inception. These games were going on back in the 1880s, 1890s. And they stopped after 100 odd years because England set up a league and we were slow in reacting to that. We didn't get a league in place in time. And there have been several opportunities or attempts to try and recreate that in different ways. So, when the game went professional, there was that midweek sort of flood league with two Welsh and English teams. There was the Anglo-Welsh Cup in the early 2000s. There's been attempts. There was the opportunity 2013-14 of getting something, but that was really a bargaining tool, maybe by the English clubs to get a better deal for you in Europe. But I think that's where we sit, and that's not a comment on the quality of the teams in the URC at all. It's not a comment because it's some of the best teams in the world at a domestic level are in Ireland and South Africa, especially Glasgow, one of the best teams around at the moment as well. But I think Welsh Rugby's best chance of survival and the best chance that the clubs have of surviving is an Anglo-Welsh league, because you cut out a lot of the costs of travelling. There was a story about Glasgow about the final of the URC last year in Pretoria. It cost them nearly £500,000 to get over there for the final at a days' notice, basically. And they won the semi-final on the Saturday in Limerick, and then the following Saturday they had to be in Pretoria, and the cost of that, which is just insane, really. So I think the place that we sit most naturally is in an Anglo-Welsh league, whether that's as a standalone league, whether it's as part of an Anglo-Welsh conference in a British league, British and Irish league, or in a greater URC, I don't know. But I don't really see much of a future for, certainly not all four. I don't see all four surviving if we're in the URC in 5 years, really.
Yeah, that's the next I was going to ask you, actually, in terms of regional rugby. As you said, we started with 5 regions, we're now 4. Lots of argument as to whether we can actually sustain the 4 regions going forward. Do you think 4 is sustainable? I mean, you've already alluded to it in terms of the URC, but if it was a Anglo-Welsh league, for example, could the 4 survive within that structure, or would we have to consider dropping to 3, do you think?
There seems to be a groundswell now, isn't there, of people saying that we can't afford 4, whether that's from the playing sides.
Yeah.
To support 4, you need about 200 players of professional standard. And we're nowhere near that. We don't have 200 players of professional standard. We may have, we may be able to put pathways in place to create that. I mean, Ireland seem to have that, but there's a very different context and they have very different advantages. So I don't see that we can create a system that creates 200 professional standard players and supporting 4 clubs with budgets of kind of £7-8 million a year. I just don't see how that's possible. So I think that leads to we've got at least one too many. At least, probably.
You up for a merger then?
No. Well, when I was growing, as you know, my dad was a Swansea fan, so that's when I spent most of my early rugby watching days, was in St Helens until I got was able to catch a bus on my own, and then I found my way over the Lychar instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be interesting, wouldn't it?
It definitely would.
It's his natural bent, fellows.
No, not really. Okay, just to finish the segment then. So if you haven't already read it, I'll do the plug for you. I'm holding up the book. There we go. So Welsh Rugby, What Went Wrong. We've all read it. It's an excellent read. If you haven't read it, then where have you been for the last 12 months? And an ideal time to read it now, just before the autumn internationals as well. So congratulations again on the book. And hopefully, well, you got enough to write a second chapter now, I would say, probably, or a second book. Just with the last week of news would be enough probably to write a second one, but would expect the sequel to come out soon, maybe.
I want to I want to write Welsh Rugby what went right in a couple of years' time.
That'd be nice, wouldn't
Got
it?
my
That would be nice.
ambition.
Yeah.
Really, really helpful for people of my generation as well, though, Simon. To get the lowdown on what came before and how that's contributed, because a lot of that reading was new to me. It was really informative, and your sort of your passion and anger came across, as well as your humour. Um, I really felt your anger, and it made me angry, having not experienced it, firsthand myself. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah, one of the first reviews the book got on Amazon was somebody saying, "Cracking book. I was tamping when I finished it."
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
Yeah,
right,
you
job
are.
done. There we go.
And I think for me, the thing that came across was, we are not like us three, not you, Rod, you were barely a twinkle in your daddy's eye, but we're too young to remember the glory days of the
Yeah.
70s. But we certainly had dads who did remember those glory days, who did wax lyrical about it. We all, I knew what boot money was before I read your book, because that was the thing. We all knew Cardiff were the pretty boys and they had the plush jobs and the plush cars. We knew down this way, then you get given time off from the steelworks or the pits to train. um I've been really lucky to meet some of the older generation. Like, we all know I love a selfie, but I've been really lucky to meet some of the older generation of players, such as your Gareth Edwards, your Phil Bennett, your Bobby Windsors. And when you look at those old video tapes of what they were playing, if you could just imagine what they could have done being professional. Everybody knew England were being played under the counter, same in, professionalism. France laughed in the face of amateurism. Do you know what I mean? Same with South Africa and New Zealand. And I think you're right. One of the points you make in the book, which is so right, the Welsh public are the Welsh rugby public are so forgiving, providing the international team is doing well. It papers over the cracks for absolutely everything. And I knew before reading your book that I was not a fan of Roger Lewis. I am really not a fan of Roger Lewis now, Mr. Rockstar himself. What being mindful of what I say, what a unique individual then, shall we say. And it is, we had the opportunity to get on the professional train at the start, and we were just so bound by the committee men being like, we don't like this, we don't like that, and everybody protecting their own self-interest. And I know we laughed and said, oh, Scarlett's Ospreys merger. I think if push came to the shove and it came down with it, and we knew we had to survive in some way or another, yeah, it would suck, but we would probably do it. We'd sulk. Do you know what I mean? Not as bad as some of the Neath fans were still sulking 24 years later. 24 years, 20 years later. And I get that. I've seen that firsthand recently. But for me, we keep doing the same thing time and time again. We're never going to learn. And unless, Abby Tierney comes in and goes through that institutionalized misogyny, sexism, culture of whatever it is, and kind of roots that out. And you've got to do that at ground level as well. So we need to move away from that culture, really, because we've got a fantastic history and we have got such a way of creating players with such talent that if we don't modernize, we don't become professional, we lose that. And that's a shame, because we're one of the greatest, okay, we don't win stuff, but we are one of the greatest rugby nations in the world. I wouldn't want to be anybody else apart from a Kiwi. And I know we've discussed this before about my love for the All Blacks, but great book from the point of view of, again, history repeating itself time and time again, and we don't seem to learn. We just don't. So cracking read, 5 out of 5 from, that is Simray approved, that is. I'll put a review on Amazon later as well and see how much I've enjoyed it. But absolutely cracking. But any other questions for Si, Rod, Mark? Have we covered everything?
No, that's great. Really interesting to hear
Really,
your
really good one.
perspective, and fantastic timing as well.
Yeah.
Coming on the pod with obviously not fantastic for the ladies, but
Yeah.
it's nice to have your insight.
It's almost quite
Yes.
considerate. It's almost quite considerate of the union to have another outrage, isn't it? Just
Just as we're recording, yeah.
Always, always,
But
always.
as you say, Sam, it comes around every few months, every year or so. There's some other
It's just
catastrophe, isn't it? It's endless.
always we bounce from disaster to disaster, and
Welsh way.
Yeah.
it is, and we all get so set in our ways about protecting what we see as ours that we forget that sometimes you've got to look at the bigger picture. You've got to win small, like you've got to lose small to win big, and we're never gonna have a good regional teams if we don't get grassroots right. We're never gonna then move on to a good international team. And I think, was it you and I, Mark, that were discussing about A sides?
Yeah.
It's a shame that
Yeah.
we don't have A sides anymore.
Definitely.
If we can improve the finances, that can come back. There's no reason why we can't be profitable. And hopefully big things ahead for Ospreys with going to St Helens. I know you're a Scarlets fan, but again, nobody wants to see any of the clubs go. We don't want those rivalries to go to the wall at the end of the day. But anyway, it is Internationals Week, and we've got Fiji on Saturday, and we've all kind of gone with our starting 15s. I changed mine about 3 times, and then I lost a piece of paper with my team on. So I've done. I'm on my 4th version now. So
Only 4.
Only 4.
I've been doing it for the last week, and
You
yeah,
think
it's
about
probably
things
changed
too
about
much.
30 odd times.
Think about things too much. Just go with it. Says she, who's super cautious about things normally. So who wants to shove their head above the parapet and go first?
Can I just check something first as well? Almost as important as the team itself is how's everybody actually written the team? Because I can only write a rugby team in one way, which is 15 to 9, 1
Yeah,
to 6, and then 8 and 7. Because every single program that I read in the 80s and
was
90s
set out in
was
that
laid out in
way.
that way, and I cannot look at a rugby team in any other way but that. Rod shaking his head. What have you got, Rod? 1 to 15?
Rod's got 1 to
Yeah.
15, and you, son.
It's just
Simple,
wrong.
straightforward.
It's just wrong.
Terrible, terrible.
No,
And with
you
Mark,
lose.
Oh God, it
definitely.
messes with my brain when I see it in that in your structure. God,
It's when it
one
comes
of my
up
pet
as well on
peeves
the
actually.
screens. All right,
It's
well,
all
I
gone
can go.
down in my estimations.
Well, if that's one of
Right.
your pet peeves, let's start with 15 then, shall we? Can win it. I've got at 15. Anybody with any digression from win it at 15?
Agreed.
No, God, I think it's bound to be, isn't it? I think.
The
Yeah.
obvious choice, yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the positions are going to be fairly obvious, but I think there are some obvious discussion points as we go through, I imagine as well. So there we are. I went first with the easiest choice probably of the entire team with win it at 15.
Should we do the other outside backs then?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've shifted Mason Grady to the wing. I got a sneaky suspicion that Gatlin might do the same, based on his centre selections in the wider squad. So I've got Mason on one wing, and then outside shot, but real top performer over the last few weeks, particularly the last 3 weeks, Blair Murray.
Let my read. Snap.
I think there's a lot in that, isn't there? Because
Yeah.
I think one of the ways to beat Fiji is to have that strong kicking game. And there was a sign of it coming back over the summer, was there, of that kind of kick first kind of approach and then play. And I think he might be really tempted, Gatlin, to have lots of kicking options. And Murray really, apparently, is fullback, who happens to be playing on the wing at the moment. So,
Yeah.
so I can see somebody like Blair Murray or Tom Rogers maybe getting one of those spots in the absence of Josh Adams and Ian Williams.
Yeah.
I've been
So
kind
what
to Rio
about
Dyer in
thoughts?
mind. I have kept Dyer in my 15. I think it was Cuthbert that said on the Scrum 5 pod today he's got enough money in the bank from what he's done previously to deserve to keep his place just about. I know he hasn't been in the best of form to start the season, but I think it would be harsh to drop him. I definitely think, I know we're not going to talk about bench tonight, but there are players that can cover that position on the bench maybe as well. But I've gone Grady and Dyer. I know Dyer may not be everybody's cup of tea, but
I don't mind Dyer. He has got credit in the bank, and I do like him, but his game is relatively limited. And I think Fiji are going to be so hot in the air. I'd rather our attacking threats come elsewhere than from just pure kick chase. I think we've almost got to fight fire with fire, and I think Blair Murray is sort of that player. So who have you gone for, Mark? Is it Mason and
I've gone
Dyer?
for
Is
Grady
that
and Dyer, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think, as you say, Murray needs to be within the 23 definitely because he can cover,
Mm,
he can cover 10, cover 15, cover wing, probably
yeah.
play prop as well, I imagine. But yeah, does
Mm,
everything, doesn't
He's prop shaped, isn't it?
he?
Short and squat, powerful. Good.
Yeah. Right. So should we put you on the spot then with the most,
Come
probably
on,
the
Si, let's
hardest
go.
positions to pick, maybe the two centres?
I have not got a clue what Gatland's going to do in the centre or in midfield.
No.
I don't know who the 10, 12,
not a
13
scoop.
is going to be. I really, because he's tried 5 or 6 fly halves now since he's been back, and it doesn't seem to really have stuck at anything. He doesn't really seem to have identified an approach yet, and I don't know. I think that's one of the things to look forward to, is if we can get a kind of an identity back, because there hasn't been one for the last year or so. But I don't know. So I mean, my instinct, what I would do, but I don't think Gatland will do this, is I would go with Anscombe, and I'd go with Eddie James, and I think I would go Max Llewellyn, I think. But I don't see him doing that. I think he's going to be more conservative, and I think he'll probably go with possibly Owen Watkin in the centre.
Yeah.
I don't know,
That as
but
well.
I think Eddie James is a fabulous player. I think he's going to be a tremendous player, and I am biased, obviously, but he's got everything that you would want from a 12, really. Accepting that he's very, very raw. But I do, because if you think about the team that Fiji are going to bring, they're going to have Naisalevu and Chandrad, Tuisova, and all of these players charging down the centre channel. So they need to be robust defensively, I think. And
Yeah.
I think Gatland might be a bit more conservative there, but I don't know.
I think Owen Watkin is almost a shoe-in for that reason. He's long been Gatland's defensive leader, hasn't he? And he does. I think he was on the rap pod earlier. Jim said that he does that role day in, day out for the Ospreys as well. And Gatland favours him. I don't think he's going to push the boat out too far there. I think he'll go safe and secure. The more interesting choice, yeah, you're right, will be who's inside him at 12. And I don't know what the right option there is to sort of complement Owen Watkin. Maybe it is an Eddie James.
I
Not,
think
I'm
there's
not
any
sure.
chance the Gatland might go for the two playmakers, go Anscombe at 10 and Thomas at 12.
He does seem to really rate Ben Thomas, doesn't he? And he said
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, I think when he was announcing the squad, that he's the form back in Wales.
Yeah.
So it'd be really odd to say that about somebody then not pick them.
Yeah.
12 was where I really, really struggled,
Yeah.
because I was kind of thinking, you can look and see, yeah, okay, they're great, but how are they going to fit together, and how are they going to play against Fiji? And that's the one space really that I couldn't fill.
I mean, are we thinking that Thomas Williams and Anscombe are the starting halfbacks?
Yeah,
I think they're
would
likely
say
to be.
so.
I think going forward, I'd like to see Ben Thomas play more at 10. I think
Yeah,
that he's not playing 10 for Cardiff obviously hampers that decision in terms of playing him at 10 internationally. Ideally, I'd like to see Thomas at 10 with Eddie James outside him, and then Max Llewellyn at 13. I think that's the future potentially, or even sort of Costello at 10 longer term. Hopefully he can get his confidence back as well. He's at a tough start to the year, but I think there's certainly potential there with him as well. I think it's too early to disregard his sort of credentials as well.
he's taken a bit of a mental battering, so that's why
Yeah.
I've gone. Like, we know I'm not a particular fan of Anscombe, but I have gone with him at my 10 because I think, and I'm going to sound patronising now, I think Costello needs a little bit of kid glove treatment at the minute because he is still young, and the pressure that he's had, he's got the talent there. We know that, but we don't want him to be in a position where he's mentally struggling because of performances on the field. So I have gone with Anscombe at 10.
Do Anscombe's hamstrings come into this decision at all? Because obviously, if he's playing 10, he's only done place kicking in the last game for Gloucester. As you know, it's the first game that he's place kicked. There's been lots of talk about if he plays 10, then they've got to have another place kicker on the pitch.
Yeah.
Then brings Ben Thomas in. Whether Thomas Williams is kicking, it seemed to be strong enough. I know that was mentioned on Scrum 5, I think, today, wasn't it? Whether he's a potential backup kicker if Anscombe's hamstrings decide that they don't fancy a game on Sunday again, as usual. But yeah, do you think that influences the decision at all as to who plays 12? I mean, for me, I think Eddie James should play 12. I think he's creative in that role, but he's also powerful as well. You know, if you
it depends what Gatland wants to do, because he's been kind of thrashing about a bit, looking for options, and he's given lots of caps to lots of players. But really now he needs to start sort of settling on what he wants to do, really. And if he sees Eddie James being being a potential starting 12 in the World Cup, which is not that far away now. He's always said he likes to get players up to 30, 40 caps before they go into World Cups. If you've got a base of players who have got 30, 40 caps right through your team, and a few are a bit more experienced and a few are a little bit less experienced, then that's what he wants to see, really. So it would make sense to do that. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Mark. I think that there is it would be odd for him to have said something about Anscombe's kicking and hamstrings if he wasn't really thinking about, and then praise Ben Thomas.
Yeah.
Wasn't thinking about that 10, 12 maybe.
Yeah.
Talking of Anscombe as a total aside, and I haven't been able to find it online, does anybody know what he said to that ref to get him yellow carded?
No.
No?
We need a lip reading expert, don't we, on that one?
Like, I'm tempted to get my mum involved because she can lip read because of her deafness. But it must have been pretty like, because the ref was really like, I know what you said. Yeah. You said no, off. So it must have been like pretty chippy to like get that reaction. And I've tried everywhere to find it because I'm like, what have you said? Like, I want to know what you said. Like,
I know that the Aussies and the Kiwis have a really liberal relationship with the C word. So maybe that was it.
I have no problem with that word. It was perfectly fine until the Victorians came about and said that it wasn't. This Victorian sensibility. Up until that point in time, it was perfectly acceptable to use that word.
It's also too
on to PG tonight anyway, so
yeah, it's a
absolutely would not drop that in public. My mum would kill me. But
so should we put our colours to the mast then? I know Gatland's not going to do this, but I would like to see Ben Thomas at 10 with Eddie James at 12 and Max Llewellyn at 13.
Yeah,
and that does just scare me defensively.
Yeah.
It really does. I think I'm with Gatland, where I almost don't want to see a back line at this stage against Fiji, which is just a must win with our recent record, without Owen Watkin in it.
And that's why he's going to go.
I see his value. We all do. We're all on the same page. How do you find how do you view him, Si, as a Scarlet?
Owen Watkin, he's really organised and really solid and good defensively, isn't he? He's not the most exciting. But then I think it really depends, really. I mean, Gatland likes him clearly because he always picks him, doesn't he? He's always in the 3 or 4 centres that he picks in every squad that he picks. And he keeps going back to him, and he's now taking on, from what I understand, more of a leadership role in the Ospreys as well. So he's kind of running the defence, and he's sort of a very senior player there in the group there now. And I think he's a good, solid player. But then, if Gatland wants to see these other players, when is he going to play them? Because from what he's been saying, he's been talking about trying to get a bit of stability and getting a bit of a pattern going, and maybe picking the same team for 3 weekends, pretty much. So it wouldn't be surprising, given what he's been saying, that the team that starts on Sunday, pretty much, with barring injuries, the team that finishes against South Africa. So if that's the case, when do you look at some of these other players? If he knows what Watkin can do, he doesn't know what Eddie James can do. He doesn't know what Max Llewellyn can do, really, in this context. So does he have a look at them? I've got a feeling he will go conservative, and it probably will be sort of Ben and Owen Watkin and Anscombe maybe, but it would be nice to see something a bit more exciting. But
I'm with you.
Against that midfield, it's risky.
So Rod, would you go Anscombe with Watkin, and who would outside centre?
Well, I actually had, and this, God, can we go back to the days where the centre picked, the back line picked itself? We're not used to this
we
level.
Just pick Jamie Robertson, John Fox, and it'd be done.
Yeah. Because it's looking so messed up. I'm just looking down at my phone now, but yeah, I've got Anscombe at 10. I've got Owen Watkin outside centre and Eddie James inside him written down here. But that's not the consensus I'm hearing here. So let's push the boat out. Let's not go conservative. Let's do sort of the team we want to see.
Yeah, we'll do the Harlem Globetrotter Wales version.
Yes.
Yeah, I did
Let's do it.
I did do a Dr. Pepper's team of what's the worst that can happen, and then I just thought it was a bit too left. Left field.
So who have you got, Sam? Who's your 10,
to be honest,
10, 12, 13?
I've gone conservative again on my fifth attempt, and I'm pretty much the same as you and Sai, really. But then when I was looking at going outside of the box, then I was kind of more with the team that I would like to see blooded in and played. But to be honest with you, after watching them against Scotland on Saturday, then was a bit of a thriller in the second half, the way that they came back, because you kind of thought they were done and dusted with those those tries by Darcy. Fair play to the lad. Obviously very happy John, Scottish husband, but I think it's going to be a bit of a bruiser, and they big lads. So you're right, looking at your own Watkin, who is solid. You're right, he's not the most exciting that there is, but he's solid, dependable. You've got that there with him. So I'll post my final 15 on Instagram tomorrow morning, but I think it's going to be a conservative one.
9 we can probably all agree on.
Yeah.
Thomas Williams for 9,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Safe hands.
Right. Rod, I'm going to fry your brain now. Front row next.
Well, front row?
Yeah, go on
then. So obvious choice at hooker with Dewi Lake. Carrying ability, leadership qualities, captain, shoehorned in there. Then either side of him, I've gone for Henry Thomas, a tight head. I think he is our best option. I don't think that's really up for debate. And then I did flit a little bit between Gareth Thomas and Nicky Smith, and I've ended up with Smith.
Nicky Smith.
Just because I love him.
Oh God, you and your boy crushes. Get a root on there.
And I miss him. And I wish I had more.
I'll get you a
I think that's
poster.
harsh. I think that's harsh on Sir Gareth Thomas. Personally, I think he's done very little wrong in that position. I think Nicky Smith coming off the bench could be really, really destructive. So I've kept Gareth Thomas at 3, or a tight head with Nicky Smith coming off the bench. I think
again with the sensible decisions, Mark, always.
I know. I think Archie Griffin fit could be pushing Henry Thomas. He was one of the successes on the summer tour. He's got his illness issues at the moment, which are going to stop him from being picked as a starter certainly. But I think longer term, he'll be pushing Henry Thomas for that tight head spot definitely.
Verdict on Azarati?
Not sure.
No.
I think he's a good, solid player, isn't he? he's never let Wales down when he's played, but I think Griffin's ceiling is really high. I think he's got a lot of potential if he gets over the illness injury issues that he has at the moment, obviously. But I think Henry Thomas is the form tight head, playing regularly at the moment, playing well for the Scarlets, accepting the opposition. Maybe he's not been the greatest, but then he did okay against the Bulls. Dewi obviously starts, and being named captain, that decision's been made already, obviously. And then as a win Adelaide boy, obviously I'm going to go for Nicky Smith. I think he's got to be in, isn't he? I think Anthony will stick with Gareth Thomas, but I'd love to see Nicky Smith in.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're probably right though, Mark. He'd probably be better off the bench than Gareth would.
Yeah, I
The
just think it's
type
a
of
bit harsh
player
on
he
Thomas,
is.
who's not done an awful lot wrong as he really at international level. He's been solid, and I think as you say, though, Nicky Smith has had a brilliant start to the season, and it's hard to not pick him, but I think it's harsh on Gareth Thomas to not pick him or
I
to leave
loved
him,
what
sorry,
he's
as
done
well.
at Leicester.
Yeah,
Really
no,
enjoyed
superb. Yeah.
watching him play at Leicester. Um,
Do you want to go with the second rows then, Sam?
oh, yeah, yeah. I would, and I know people don't rate him, and I do think it's a shame that the rumours of him going to Montpellier are likely to come to fruition at the end of the season. But I have gone for Adam Beard, Jack Morgan, and Will Rowland. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. I'm doubting myself now.
I've gone Rowlands and Beard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest selection on the sheet, really. The two of them.
Thanks, Robert.
No,
Yeah,
they've
Sam took an hour to put that second row combination together, didn't he, Sam? Yeah.
Yeah. Really pondered over that, really
Yeah.
pondered. And I did kind of go with Jack because I did think he played superb last game.
Yeah, we all got Jack Morgan chewing at 7. I know Raffles a superb player, and it's a real shame that we've got two such quality players at the same position. But I think Jack Morgan has to start for me.
Yeah.
7.
100%.
Yeah. He's the best. Unfortunately, we're back in that situation we had with Warburton and Tipuric, isn't it? That we've got two potentially world-class sevens.
Yeah.
And we can't fit them into the same team, really.
No.
It unbalances the back row a bit too much, I think, if we have both of them playing, which is a pity. And Jack's, although, Raffles tearing up trees as well in England, isn't he? But Jack,
he's doing really well.
Yeah.
But Jack's got that post-injury bump at the moment, isn't he, really, where he's just getting better and better every game as he sort of warms up and gets into the season since coming back from that injury. So you don't want to break his stride almost, do you? You just want to give him every opportunity to continue that upward trajectory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we put 6 and 8? Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, you've got the other one to come off the bench then. So if then you've got Raffle, you would think would be on the bench to really sort of speed
I
things up.
had him on my bench.
Yeah.
Should we put 6 and 8 as a package together, sort of presuming everybody's fit? Si, who would you play at 6 and then 8?
Presuming everybody's fit and sort of match fit, then I think Wainwright, if he's fit, has to start at 8, I think. And then, I don't know whether this is my bias again, but I think Plumtree at 6 would be... It's interesting. I think we all listened to the Scrum Fight podcast, but he's talking today, wasn't he, about not really seeing much of a difference between the roles of a 6 and an 8, which was interesting. So he'll be playing as an 8 anyway. 6 or 8. But I think that gives a good physicality with Will Rowlands and Beard in front of him. That's a really physical, solid back five there, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's what you need against Fiji, really, is that physicality. I haven't asked anybody to prepare for this, but we've said it's a must-win game. How hard do we think it's going to be on Saturday? Because obviously they're coming off the back of that loss against Scotland, and quite happy for you to give me a margin rather than a score prediction. But do we think it's, we as a public expect, don't we? So do we think it's going to be a Wales win? And if so, by how many?
You've got to disregard that Scotland game. By the sounds of it, it's going to be an entirely different team that comes to Cardiff. So I doubt they're even doing a lot of analysis on it. They'll just be focusing on themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, God, I don't know where I am with the prediction. For that reason, history's not on our side at the moment. What is it? Nine on the bounce,
Yeah.
nine
Yeah.
defeats on the bounce. If we lose this one, it'll equal our record for consecutive losses, I think. Is that the case? So I'm pretty nervous going into this one. I want to say roof closed, Wales by a score. I'd be well happy with, but
It's a scary
it's going to
game,
be
isn't it?
close.
It's a very, very scary game. I mean,
Yeah.
technically we're underdogs, aren't we? Because Fiji are ranked higher than us currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really terrifying one, to be honest. The thought of losing it with what's to come then for the remainder of the autumn doesn't bear thinking about really what that would do to confidence. Um, I think one score either way, and I wouldn't want to call it, to be honest, either way. I'm really that torn on whether we can actually pull out a win. To be fair, it is the strongest squad the Gatlins had to pick from for quite a while. And you would hope that the quality and the experience and the leadership coming back into the team will get us over the line, just about.
They also had 2 weeks together, and they as a squad,
Yeah.
without any games. Most of them have coming off wins as well, so they'll have had a little bounce from the last weekend of the URC block. But then and Fiji will have had players will have players coming in from France and England who will have had a couple of days together, and they won't have been in the Fiji camp for a long time, because in the summer when they won the Pacific Nations Cup, it was mainly Fiji and Drua players, wasn't it? It was home-based players. They didn't really pick many of the European-based players. So, but the thing with Fiji always is they have so many players capable of just magic stuff. They can create stuff from anywhere. They're huge. They're physical. They're quick. All of them. They can all play. So, and the history is, we won the last 6, but 5 of those have been 1 or 2 scores. They've been tight. They've never been easy. And the last time we played them at home, it was they had a red card early in the game, and we still only just about squeaked home at the end of it. So
discipline could be important actually Sunday, because Scotland benefited from sort of Fijian indiscipline on Saturday to build that lead first half, which in the end they needed to sort of pull away really. But if we can lead them into penalties and sort of frustrate them in the first 20 minutes, then that could be the key to winning it possibly.
Which kind of leads back, I think, to the selection, doesn't it? That it might be quite a relatively conservative team with a strong kicking game, physical team. But yeah, it's going to be really tough, isn't it? I think Wales will sneak it, but I think it'll be no more than 8 to 9 points, probably less than that.
I've said Wales by 5. That's kind of where I'm thinking. Only 2 autumn internationals this last weekend, guys. So we had Scotland, Fiji, and then we had that corker of England versus the All Blacks. Now, I'm part English, so I'm not one of these, whoa, I hate England, Welsh Rugby fans. Believe you me, I am joyful when we beat them, because they are the old enemy. But I'm not one of these, I'll support whoever's playing England. I'm not that way inclined. However, I have got a soft spot for the Kiwis. They are my second team. So I was sat there on Saturday with my Adidas top on and feeling quite happy watching it. And we know that the last couple of outings between England and New Zealand have been really, really close. And it looked at one point that England were going to come away with a comfortable more than a point win. And then we had poor George Ford at the end with those 3 epic mistakes that have completely changed the game within the last 5 minutes. And for me, as a semi-neutral, what a test match. I really enjoyed, absolutely, thoroughly enjoyed. And did you guys have the chance to to watch it on a scale of 1 to 10, how sorry do you feel for George Ford?
Yeah, see, we're the other side of the Welsh supporting public, Sam, that we will support whoever plays against England, probably. So we were very happy to see New Zealand squeak the win. For England, it's another missed opportunity, isn't it? They could have
Yeah.
won either of the two games they played over there in the summer. They probably should have won on Saturday. They had the platform to do so. But this is what the All Blacks do, isn't it? You know, the All Blacks, they may not be the team that they were, but they've still got the ability to drag out a win against the odds. And they got that winning mentality. They got them across the line in the end. And England haven't quite got that killer instinct yet to finish off these close games that they should be winning.
They tried,
Yeah,
you know.
it looked as if they went too pre-planned, didn't they, with the substitutions? England
Yeah.
took off players who were just having superb games. You know, the halfbacks were superb.
Too early. Yeah.
Yeah, too early, and they could have lost shape. But I really felt for George Ford actually at the end, because that missed drop goal wasn't. I mean, the tackle was his fault, but to an extent. But the missed drop goal wasn't his, because he obviously called a play that Harry Randall didn't understand, didn't pick. Because he went the wrong way, didn't he, initially from the first run, and then had to stop and check back, and then threw a wild pass. And then that final pass then was, you know, I mean, Ford did well to get a drop goal attempt, let alone, it would be a 10-1 against really landing that, really. But it was really tough for them, wasn't it? But there, you know, if I wouldn't mind being in that position. If Wales had just had 3 tests against New Zealand and lost all of them by a couple of points, then
I'd be okay with that.
Exactly.
You know,
I'd live with that.
better than anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And,
England are a very good team at the end of the day, aren't they? They're building something really, really good there. They've got a good squad. You know, they're going to be there or thereabouts come to the Six Nations time. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they always seem to come good at the right time.
Yeah. I do think England need to find another way to finish games, though, because they've relied on drop goals on numerous occasions within recent memory. And it got to those final throws of the game, and it felt like the entire England squad was just sort of looking to George Ford, breath held, just going, are you gonna do it? Are you gonna get us out of this one? And nobody was sort of fronting up and just, you know, playing what was in front of them in those final throws. So I think they've got to, you know, be a bit more adaptive in sort of playing what's in front of them. But yeah, that wasn't vintage All Blacks, was it? But it was hell of a game. Some massive hits in there. Wallace Satiti, phenomenal. By far one of the best players on the pitch. That England back row was ferocious, although they did make a few mistakes. But no, just a really fun game. I was getting quite drunk towards the end of that second half, so it was a bit leery towards the end. And we were sat at a table with a 8 foot wide TV screen about 6 inches from my face. So I was sort of watching it, looking up like this with the hits happening, you know, right in front of my nose. So bit of a blur, but it was fun.
I don't need to go out to watch the rugby. I got a 72-inch telly downstairs, thanks to my husband. Honest to God, he said our telly broke. I broke the telly, right? I know John's going to be listening to this, and I know that he's going to dob me in on social media. I broke the telly. I broke the telly playing SingStar on my PlayStation, singing ABBA and Queen songs. I'm not sorry. I enjoyed it. It was in the days when I was drinking. I really enjoyed. But I blew the speakers on the telly. So we had to order a new telly. So John said I've ordered a telly. Box turns up. Box comes in. 5'2". I lie down next to it for concept of size. It's at least a foot longer than I am. I'm like, what? So waiting for him to come home, he opened the telly and it's like 72 inches. And me being very dry, I just looked at it and I went, and again, Rod, you may not know the reference. I said, the UCI have just called us. And he's like, why? They want to borrow the telly because one of these screens is broken. What made you think we needed a telly that size? But the worst thing is, telly broke in the bedroom, and he's bought exactly the same size for the bedroom. So the neighbours must think we're bonkers because it's wall mounted and they can probably see it if our curtains are open. But absolutely amazing when you're playing Harry Potter on the PlayStation in bed when you're playing PlayStation. Because again, we've got to have two PlayStations because we argue about who's going to play at the PlayStation. 40 odd years old, and we're arguing about PlayStation. But lots of furore before the game as well about the haka.
Oh, yeah.
And Joe Marler. Now, I love Joe Marler. It's clear that it didn't come from a bad place, but all this was like, oh, how are England going to front up to the haka? It's a bit of a dram squib, really, wasn't it? We're just going to walk forward a little bit and be like, it wasn't that Welsh standoff, was it?
Compared to the rugby league, I don't know whether you saw the Samoa England standoff for their, I don't know, I'm not sure what their war dances called the Samoans, but they were literally nose to nose with with England players. And that was a proper standoff. And at any point I was expecting fists to start flying or heads to start butting or whatever, but I don't know how they sort of controlled themselves because they were literally face to face.
Because I know in Union it's only a £2,000 fine, isn't it, if you front up to the haka? So I would think it would be worth it.
Doing it, yeah.
Yeah,
like
every time. Every time.
If anybody's been to see Max Boyce when he says do the Humpty Dumpty to the haka, that just creases me. And you could tell on Twitter as well about the people who are not fans because they started retweeting when Wales won the haka. Nobody's winning the haka, mate. You just fronted up to it, and that like tickled me somewhat. But you know, again, Amala announced his retirement, which it was a lovely statement. And I love it. If anybody follows him on like TikTok or Instagram, some of the stuff he does to poor Dan Cole, how Dan Cole is still friends with him, I do not know, because he's done some hella things to him. And he just amuses me, and I love how open he's been about his mental health struggles and everything else. I think he's one of life's genuinely nice people. So it is a shame to say goodbye to Joe, even though he is English. Sorry, guys. We are, dyed in the world Welsh Rugby fans, but can't forget my nana's Brummy Peaky Blinders roots. But that kind of is it. Now, Si, got a tradition at the end of the podcast where I go rando and I ask a totally non-rugby related question. And it's just so that people who are listening can get to know us better. But also I can discover how the boys tick as well.
Right.
Discovered in the last couple of weeks that Rod started taking mushrooms at the age of 8 and seeing werewolves. Not really. Discovered Mark is quite a cultured individual. He's been to Italy. He's listened to opera, open air, amphitheatre. We've discovered I love a selfie and I'm a bit of a lunatic on the quiet and I don't do Twitter trolls. But I was thinking this week, right? And Rod's like, here we go. Oh my God.
Sweating.
I love sandwiches. Would quite happily forego anything for a sandwich because basically you can put anything in a sandwich. Pot noodle, pasty, risol, best one ever, garlic bread slices with lasagna in the middle of it as a sandwich, right? You can do so much. Si, don't look at me like that until you've tried it. Risol in a bread roll with tomato sauce is also amazing, right? Ham, cheese spread, cheese and onion crisps, amazing. Can put anything in a sandwich. Anything. Try it. I encourage you. And then I was thinking, if I was on death row, what would my final meal be? And it would be a sandwich. It would probably be a sandwich made out of Chateaubriand with something really lovely. So what would your death row meal be? And what would you be on death row for? As an aside. Don't be shy.
Who's going first? Me. I'd probably be on death row for upsetting the WRU by writing books about them, I'd imagine. But that might be what would upset them.
Attorney taking a hit out on you now.
Yes. And good Rogers coming after me. So yeah, that would be it. That actually, right, I saw on Twitter that last week there was a tweet from somebody from Scotland who was appalled about a new sort of fast food option that he'd seen from the chippy somewhere in South Wales, right? And he was appalled that Wales had got there before Scotland. And what it was a kebab in a bap and then battered and then deep fried. And it looked horrible. Looked horrible. But it'd be worth trying once, wouldn't it? Not only once. Last meal would be, I reckon, a Sunday dinner would be my last meal. Proper Sunday dinner. Rice pudding to finish.
Mm. Yeah,
Do you have any
yeah.
rice pudding?
No.
No.
Skin on top, though.
Skin, yes.
Now,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
mother makes rice pudding from scratch,
yeah.
and it is banging. It's really, really good. She does the proper old traditional stuff.
Mm.
She did stew plums and custard the other day. Now I can't deal with that. Can't deal with rice pudding either because I'm not good with textures. But yeah, if you're ever down, let me know. I'll get her to make you. She does a really good Sunday dinner. So come for dinner and you can have rice pudding as well. I'll get her
Does
to
rice
make one.
pudding
And
post well?
you probably could. You could probably get it DHL'd.
Strong envelope, wouldn't you, really?
Yeah.
No,
I'll
I
give you
like that
some of the
selection.
ingredients instead to do it yourself. Right, who's next?
Well, this is my kind of question, Sam, because I'm a massive foodie. And I agree wholeheartedly with you that you can put anything in a sandwich. And one of my favorite sandwiches growing up was the day after we had faggots and peas. And you got all that congealed gravy with peas floating around in it. You slice the faggots, lots of butter in a sandwich, spread across some of that thick gravy. One of the best sandwiches going. Um, yeah, but it doesn't look great. It does not look great.
Doesn't have to look
But it
great.
wouldn't be a sandwich. I think I would be one of these people who had a bit of a banquet, maybe, maybe not a banquet, but good 5 or
Picky
6
tea.
courses. Yeah, little bits of everything that I love. So there would definitely be, I'm half Italian, so there'd definitely be my nonna's ravioli on there. There'd be my mum's meatballs, obviously everything made from scratch, pasta as well. Um, oh, desserts rice pudding right up there. Maybe some apple crumble as well with just some good custard, homemade custard. Comfort food, really. Simple stuff, simple ingredients, nothing overworked or overcomplicated. Just honest ingredients. Yeah.
What would you be in prison for?
Probably for murdering somebody for ordering a barbecue-based pizza. Sinful.
No, absolutely not. Because
It's so
I can't do,
sweet.
no, I can't do tomatoes. Since I've had my gallbladder out, it can be hit and miss with tomatoes, whether it gives me really bad heartburn and I want to die or not.
Because
So
the
I have this
acidity.
smallest thin bake. Like if I'm making pizza bases at home and I know the sweetness of the tomato base 100% all of the way. If I'm having a bought pizza, then the safest option for me is barbecue sauce. But does your mum want to invite me for tea? Because I love a good Italian.
We got pizza oven, a proper pizza oven, homemade out of
Yeah.
clay in the garden. Yeah. I'll send you a photo.
Don't send me a
We can
photo,
do
invite me
Pizza
for
and a
tea.
pizza.
Yeah. Well, not in this weather. We'll have to wait till next summer. But yeah, pizza party. Yeah, we can do it.
Honestly, I'm near your mum and dad's age. They love me. I'm not controversial at all. But anyway, Mark, what would be your crime and what would be your final meal?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm far too nice to be on death row. So I'm going to choose a line. I'm going to steal a line from Doddy Weir in the 97 Living with the Lions DVD and say mistaken identity.
Good answer.
Best ever.
And everybody else has chosen my food choices. I would definitely go roast dinner. I would be as specific as saying roast lamb with mint sauce. What a Welsh way to go. And a rhubarb crumble, I think, with cream, not custard.
Hmm. Yeah, no,
It's
I'm not
all
a crumble
good.
person.
I'm very, very
Give it to
commercial.
me with whatever topping, and I'll scoff it down. Don't worry about that, Mark.
Oh my God. Well, for me, I would stick with sandwich. However, it's got to be my Christmas sandwich. It's got to be. Now, I was making a moist maker sandwich way before Friends. Like Christmas dinner, I can live or take, but my mum knows that on Christmas Day there have got to be leftover pigs in blanket. There's always leftover meat. She makes her own stuffing with sausage meat, apricots, chestnuts, and everything else. There's always usually leftover cranberry and bread sauce, and there's always leftover gravy. So Christmas Day, I make myself the most epic Christmas sandwich.
Mm.
We'll touch Christmas dinner, but it's not the be all and the end all. And then I've got this Christmas sandwich. And my worst crime I've ever done, where I genuinely thought my mother was going to kill me, was the year I got drunk on Christmas Eve and came home and carved her turkey. I nearly did
No
not see
way.
Christmas.
No way did you do that. Christ.
Yeah, yeah.
That would put my mum in prison on death row. It's the things
Gotta be
she would do
honest,
to me. Jesus.
literally, there's been a number of occasions where my mum has wanted to kill me, more than a number, but that is one of them. The best one, and I know we're dragging on from time, but this is the thing that, and I will tell people this till the day I die. My mum's house backs onto Kilvey Hill, and there's freeholdings at the back with chickens and goats and everything else. And we're talking early 2000s, and I'd gone to a wedding. And because of where my mum is, it's pitch black. There's very little street lighting because you've literally just got the hill behind you. And she lives up on a raised terrace, but because it's on a hill, you can either go up the steps this side and there's like 15, 20 steps and you walk along the veranda, or you can walk up the bank and along, and then there's 5 steps at the top. So I got dropped off at the bottom, and it's about 1:30 in the morning, and I was smashed, absolutely rotten drunk. And as I'm walking along the terrace, all I can hear is, and I got a hat in one hand, a bag and shoes in the other, and I turned around and I can't see anything. And there's like 15 houses along to my mum's now. And as I stop and look around, so the noise stops. So I'm like, you're just imagining stuff now, because I'm not one of these who's like bothered by ghosts and ghouls or whatever. Start walking again, and all you can hear is, and I look round again, nothing. Just like,
You watch too
thing.
much horror.
No, carried on walking, couple steps more, and it's now getting quicker. And something told me lock down. So I looked down, and it was a billy goat. And we connected. Billy goat connected eyes. Literally, I looked at it looked at me, it charged. The hat went flying, the bag went flying, the shoes went flying, and I had my keys in my hand because, as a girl, you walk on with your keys between your hands, unfortunately. And I literally get there and I'm screaming now and I'm panicking and I'm trying to get the thing in the lock. But my mum's house is here and the neighbour's house is here because of the disparity in height. I think I'm clever now and slam the gate behind me. No, the goat goes up my neighbour's steps and starts to bounce down to get to me. I get in the house, I slam the door, and I'm leaning on the door, but the goat is butting the door now. My mum, 40% hearing in 1 year, that's all she's got, but it was so loud. Of course, I'm a problem child and always making noises when I'm coming home. She's going bonkers now. And she's going, what is this? You were waking up the neighbours again. They won't be happy with you. And I'm like, Mum, seriously, I've just been chased by a goat. Don't talk shit, you're drunk again. I'm like, seriously, Mum, I've just literally been chased up the road by a goat. She opens the bedroom window. She looks outside, sees this goat. And you know what she said to me? Oh, that goes to a wedding and brings a goat home. I'm like, you being real? It's come from the small holding and it's chased me. The only way we could get the goat to go away was pour water out of the top window down to get the goat to go away. So I'm a problem child, so I would probably end up in prison for something like that, if I'm being honest. Like something totally random and stupid. But yeah, my death row meal
I thought
is...
there was going to be some goat assault at the end there. I thought you were going to make the link with the previous story and talk about carving up some goat for Christmas.
No, absolutely not. No.
No.
I'm not going to do that to animals, Rod. I like animals better than I like people.
I grew up on a farm. If a random goat wandered onto my grandfather's farm near Christmas, it would be on the dinner table probably.
I was mortified. I got taken to a Caribbean restaurant, and I'm really sort of like, I haven't got a problem with bacon or anything like that, but anything with a relatively cute face freaks me out. And I was eating it, and I was like, oh, this is really, really nice. And then I realised it was goat curry, and I've never been so mortified in my life. Just like, but you're eating beef. I'm like, yeah, but I can't eat a goat. It's like, it's not happening. But another fantastic episode. Can we plug Size Book again, please? Because it is a really fantastic read. I've loved having you on. Please come back. Can I just say, you're better looking than those two, so come back.
Oh, good.
I'm joking. You know, I love you both. And had Rod in real life. So we've got Welsh Rugby, What Went Wrong. Really good, concise. Well, yeah, an explosive account of what went wrong in Welsh Rugby. And quite a lot, really. But I think you've got some extra chapters you can add to this. So speak to your publisher.
Yeah.
You know, and you can feel free to quote us from this. Say the Welsh Rugby Union are problematic. But look forward to Fiji, guys. Rod will put the usual banner up with all our socials and everything on. We'll post our 15s tomorrow. See whether we get it right or wrong with our conservationist picked teams. And then we'll look forward next week to the match against Australia, and we'll either be happy or we'll be sad. But, you know, but thanks for bearing with us. Sorry for any noises in the background. We're recording this on Guy Fawkes night, so it has been rather loud at stages. But Si, thank you for being an amazing guest. Really loved having you on. And please come back again. Actually, do you want to come back for the Scarlets game, seeing as you're a Scarlets fan?
Oh, go on then. Yeah.
Go on then.
Go on then.
I've just made an executive decision without you two again, but we needed a Scarlets fan, did we not?
We can have some niggle next time. We didn't have to be so nice to him when he comes as a Scarlets fan.
Yes, you could get tasty next time, couldn't it?
We can literally go on a Sam's rant again about how parking is shit, a park of Scarlets, and, you know, upset them even more again. But have a cracking week. Enjoy the game wherever you're watching it, whatever you're watching it on. Rod, try and stay sober.
My intention is to do that this weekend. Yeah, definitely. I'm starting to get to that age now where I pay for it for more than 2 or 3 days.
You're not even 30. Behave yourself. I was wild until I was 35. You know,
that's the benchmark.
35.
I'll suck it up until then.
Don't get married until then either. I didn't. But have a great week all, and thank you once again for watching. Please click like, subscribe and share with your buddies.
Thanks all.